Good morning. My name is Christina. Welcome to my home. I've decided to try something new today and film my May reading wrap-up. I've never filmed, really, one of these before. I think I did a yes, no, maybe for Instagram a couple months ago, but I've decided to do a long-form style video, so we'll see how it goes. I would say I had a pretty good reading month in May. I read 13 books, which is slightly above average for me at the moment. I would say I enjoyed most of them. There was only one that I really didn't like, but I pushed through and I finished it anyway. So to kick us off, I guess a little bit of context. Well, you don't need context. No, a little bit of context. My first book of May was Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. I really wanted to love this story. I've heard so much about it from people online. One of my friends suggested I read the series, or the trilogy, and I plan to. But I listened to this one. I started reading it on my Kobo, but I was driving across the country with my husband, and so I wanted to be able to work on my knitting project. So I found the audiobook at the library and I listened to that for the majority of my reading for that book specifically. And I enjoyed it, but I find that I wasn't able to get as into it as I would if I was reading it with my eyeballs. So I liked it, I finished it, but I'm gonna reread it within the next couple of months with my eyeballs so that I can read the entire series and really get to know Max and Terrius and Tizana and fall more deeply in love with these characters. The second book that I read in May was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This is a reread for me, and I really love the Crescent City books. I know a lot of people had issues with this trilogy, specifically Crescent City 3, but I'm here for a good time. I don't care about reading literary masterpieces. I want to have fun when I read my books, and this series is fun. I really enjoyed it. I am also very much the type of person that will overlook, or not even notice, honestly, plot holes, plot inconsistencies, unless they are, as I've heard people call them online, plot craters. If they're big and they're obvious, then I, more likely to pick up on them. But generally, like I said, I read to have a good time, and Crescent City was a good time. I listened to the graphic audio version of House of Sky and Breath, and I would say I enjoyed it for the most part, but my main issue with that version was that the voice actor for Hunt didn't match the sound or the tone of voice that I would have, I was picturing in my mind. I would have swapped Rune and Hunt, the voice actors who played Rune and Hunt. That would have made more sense for me, character-wise. And then another thing that I didn't particularly like was during the spicy scenes. There were a lot more spicy scenes in the second book than House of Earth and Blood, but the narrator was doing her job. She was narrating, and then the actors who were involved, or the characters that were involved in the scenes, their voice actors were making the grunting noises in the background, and that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I've decided that I like reading my spice, not listening to it. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but that's how I feel now. So I don't know if I'm going to listen to House of Flame and Shadow, Crescent City number 3, or if I'm going to read it. Maybe I'll just get the regular audiobook if that's available from the library. We'll see. The next two books that I listened to were by Kristy Boyce. They are Dungeons and Drama and Dating and Dragons. These are YA novels that revolve around the game Dungeons and Dragons, as the name suggests. They were really cute audiobooks. I really enjoyed them. The first novel is about a high school girl, who essentially steals her mom's car with her best friend. She steals her mom's car with her best friend to go see a play in a different city, and she thinks it's not going to be a problem to take it and come home before her mom gets home from whatever she's doing. But obviously she gets caught, and she has no license, so her parents are really mad at her. And as punishment, she's forced to get a part-time job working at her dad's board game store. And she obviously thinks that's the worst thing in the world, but who wouldn't want to work at a board game store? And she becomes friends with the employees that work there, the other employees that work there. They're classmates of hers. They all go to the same high school, and they run a Dungeons and Dragons campaign every week. And so of course, one day she's working and her ex-boyfriend walks in with his new girlfriend, and she pulls her coworker Nathan over and pretends that she's dating him, and it's hilarious, and he's really awkward. And it was just It was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Obviously, with fake dating, things happen. He's also trying to win the heart of another girl who joins their campaign every so often, but just a really, really cute YA novel. And then the second book, Dating and Dragons. Again, Dungeons and Dragons is a very large part of the story, and it follows a new girl who moves to town, and she was kicked out of her old friend group, essentially, because she was interested in a guy in her friend group, and they went out on a date, and she realized that she wasn't actually into him. She didn't like his personality, or they didn't have as much in common as she thought. And you know, it just gets messy. So she joins this new school, makes some new friends. They invite her to join their Dungeons and Dragons campaign that they live stream on YouTube every week. And she starts crushing on one of the guys in her new friend group. But the main rule of this new Dungeons and Dragons campaign is no dating, because they don't want to ruin the vibes of the friend group and the campaign. Fair enough. And so obviously we know where that's going to go. But again, really, really cute. Highly recommend these books. I really liked them, and the audio narration is excellent. It's really, really good. Book number 5 of May was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Oh, man. I listened to this on audio, but this is the second book by Ashley Poston that I've read this year. Also ever. I loved this book so much. It's now on my to buy eventually. I got the audiobook from the library, and holy crap, this book was so good. I'd heard of Ashley Poston before, but I hadn't read any of her novels until I picked up The Dead Romantics a couple months ago, which is also one of my top reads of the year. And just the way that she writes about family and grief, that seems to be a theme in all of the books that I've read so far. But like, just the way I don't even know how to describe it, but the way she writes about those themes, like, it gets in you. It gets in you and it makes you think, but makes you sympathize with these characters. Fantastic. Really, really excellent writing. Anyway, the story follows Clementine, who is a 20-something living in New York. She just moved into her deceased aunt's apartment in New York City, and she and her aunt used to travel the world. Clementine would take a week off or a couple weeks off every summer, and she and her aunt would go on that. During those weeks, they would go travel to a different place every time. They went to Iceland, I think they went to Thailand, and so she was really close with her aunt. They kept in touch on a regular basis, and when her aunt passed away, she left Clementine the apartment. But she always told Clementine that the apartment was really special. It was magical, and as a kid, Clementine was like, yeah, obviously, like, it's magical, I get to spend time with you. But after she moves in, she finds out what's really special about the apartment, and that's that every so often, generally at a crossroads in someone's life, you walk into the apartment and you happen to be 7 years in the past, which obviously is not realistic, but the way that Ashley Poston writes the magical realism into these books, absolutely wonderful, absolutely fantastic. It is a romance. She meets a boy, or a man, she meets a man, and they get to know each other. Just go read it. Just go read it. Anyway, that's on my list of books that I need to purchase. It was so good, so good. After The 7-Year Slip, I read Enchantra by Kaylie Smith. This was also a book for May for my in-person book club that I attend. We read Phantasma and Enchantra for the month of May, and I said it was a good reading month. This book was absolutely incredible. Also on my list of books to purchase. I bought a copy last night and it's on the way, and I can't wait to have it in my hands so that I can read it again, because it was that good. In comparison with Phantasma, I would say I preferred Enchantra, but I enjoyed both of them very much. Enchantra follows Genevieve Grimm, who is the sister of the FMC in Phantasma, and she decides to travel to Italy to meet one of her mother's old partners, boyfriends. In the first book, we find out right away that Genevieve and Ophelia's mom died. I think it happens in chapter 1. Genevieve finds out that her mom was in correspondence with a man who currently resides in Italy, and she wants to know more about her mother. She wants to find out more about her life. Her mom was a very quiet, secretive person, and she didn't spend a lot of time with her growing up, didn't really get to know her, so she wants to find out more about her mom and her life. But when she gets there to the estate called Enchantra, she manages to sneak her way in, and by doing so is now involved and required to participate in an event that happens every year with the siblings of the man that she was corresponding with, and has to marry one of them to become part of the Silver family. It was so good. It was so good. I don't know how to describe it more without giving it away. Very gothic in its descriptions and its themes. Like, I don't even know what to say. I just loved it. I loved it so much. So I can't wait to have a copy of it so that I can hold it in my hands and swoon over it and then read it again. I'm a chronic rereader, if that isn't obvious. It's great. I love it so much. The 7th book that I read in May is Off to the Races by Elsie Silver. This is the first Elsie Silver book that I have read, and I quite enjoyed it. It follows Billy, our FMC, and Vaughn, our MMC, when Billy arrives at Vaughn's ranch for a job interview to become a horse trainer. He has a lot of doubts with her personality, the way she comes off, I think mainly her confidence. She knows what she's doing. She's very good at her job. She's worked internationally and has now decided that it's time to come back home to Canada, and there's something about her that he doesn't think will work working with him. Also, he thinks she's a total babe, and his thoughts are very raunchy's not the right word, but he wants to get in her pants right away, which I wasn't expecting right off the bat. Like, I knew that Elsie Silver primarily writes romance, but for some reason it didn't occur to me that, like, it would be, we get his perspective right away and he's like, damn, she's hot, in more explicit detail than that. And so that kind of caught me off guard a bit. But the story was a lot of fun. You get your typical miscommunication, which I don't love the miscommunication trope, but the way that the characters were fleshed out, I really liked. They felt like real people. They had real problems. They had personality, and I really enjoyed that. I will be picking up the next books in the series. And one of my favorite things, and I love this, Elsie Silver is Canadian. I am Canadian, which means I feel like never met her before in my life, but I feel like we're kindred spirits. Go Canada. Book 8 in May was Zodiac Academy Heartless Sky by Carolyn Peckham and Susanne Valenti. When I first picked up the Zodiac Academy books, was not even, like, it wasn't a joke, but I wasn't serious about it. When I first picked them up, everyone was talking about them online. I wanted to know what the hype was about. I didn't particularly like the first few books, but I couldn't put them down for some reason. I heard someone equate them to, like, the junk food of romance novels, and I would 100% agree. There's just something a little bit addicting about those books, and I haven't been able to stop. So Heartless Sky, I believe, is book 7. In the main Zodiac Academy series. It's hard to go into detail about the plot without spoiling the first few books, but I think there were 12 different POV characters, which I did find quite a little bit confusing. I wanted to focus more on our 2 FMCs, Darcy and Tori, and their love interests, and then some of the side characters and their budding romance. I wanted to focus more on that, but obviously, in order to move the story forward, those other narratives were necessary. So, yeah. But the deeper I get into the Zodiac Academy books, the more I can't stop. I need to keep reading. I need to find out what happens. I really, really, really hate the villain in these books. I wish I could help them. But alas, they are fictitious, and I am not. It was fun. Book 9. This has been a controversial book all over the internet since it was published, and that is Silver Elite by Dani Francis. I've heard some really interesting conversations around this book in particular. A lot of people are concerned that this author is a problematic author, that they've had, some scandals or controversies, and that's why that's why they've decided to publish under a pen name. But then I've also heard other perspectives that the real controversy is the fact that publishers are essentially forcing small authors to be the ones to do all of their marketing and all of their promos, where they'll say, you need to really be pushing your books in order to get your sales up, while ending up providing a really big marketing budget for a new unknown author who has no work, who's not doing any self-promotion themselves. And, these indie authors or these smaller authors are really struggling to push their books online. I don't know enough about the publishing industry, about writing in general or authors in general, to provide my own opinion about this, but I would say I agree with the conversations around, like, publishers do have the finances to invest more in marketing for these smaller authors so that we can get more diverse authors, diverse voices out in the world to read and make them more accessible and more easily available for people to pick up from the library or pick up at your local bookstore. So with that out of the way, Silver Elite by Dani Francis is a fantasy novel that has a military element to it. I've heard some people say it's similar to The Hunger Games and Divergent. I would say it is more similar to Divergent than The Hunger Games, where you have a female main character who has a power. Yeah, a magic power where the governing body of the country that she lives in is trying to get rid of all of these people who have these special powers. She's able to communicate mind to mind with other people who have this ability, and I believe the government is fighting essentially the resistance and trying to get rid of these people. I enjoyed this book. A lot of people didn't like it. I think they found it a little bit basic, but I had a really good time with it. I thought it was really impressive. I really liked the ending. You know, we kind of got some things tied up. There's obviously, it sounds like there's going to be a sequel, especially with the way the book ended. There were a lot of really good twists that I don't read too much into these things, but I didn't see coming, and I had a good time. So if you're also looking for a good time, definitely recommend Silver Elite by Dani Francis. The 10th book that I read in May is called A Blue Ribbon Romance by C.M. Nascosta. This is, I would say, it's a companion piece. It's not a sequel, but it's a companion piece to Morning Glory Milking Farm by the same author. This book follows Rourke, the MMC from the first book in the series, and it's his perspective the whole time. Kind of, we get to see how he registers and signs up for the farm, how he meets our protagonist in the first book, Violet, more of his day-to-day life in Cambric Creek, and like how he kind of goes about his day and thinks about her and how they meet, his lifestyle. I didn't enjoy it very much. I remember feeling this way when I was reading the first book, but I found that the writing was a little bit confusing. Whether it was like not even run-on sentences, but just the thought structure felt really disjointed. There were some chapters or paragraphs that started with, a certain thought or idea, but it's like, I guess, a flashback or in reference to something that happened previously, but then they give you more context of the present day and then, I guess, go back to thinking about what happened at that time with the original thought, and I found it a little bit confusing. I also didn't really like the way that Rourke was thinking about or discussing Violet, whether it was internally himself or with his friends. Yeah, I really liked the original story, but this one, I think it could have been reworked, could have been a little bit better. The next book I read was a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This is the third Ashley Poston novel that I've read, and I listened to it on audio, and it follows our FMC Eileen, nicknamed Elsie, who every year her book club takes a week reading retreat in upstate New York. They rent a cabin, and her book club drives in from all over the country, and they read and they drink wine and they have a good time. But this year, for some reason, all of her book club are unavailable. Her best friend is on the last minute trip to Iceland with her boyfriend. I think someone else is on a work trip. So it just happens that not everyone or no one else is able to come. So Elsie decides she's doing it anyway. She's going anyway. She's already booked the time off from work. So she's going. But on her way there, she gets caught in a rainstorm and I think doesn't have cell signal. Her GPS stops working. Her car breaks down in a small random town and she's stuck there. But it turns out that the small random town that she's in is the town of the books series where, how do I explain it? The book series that brought the book club together several years ago. This town is the town setting of the books. A fictional town. It's not real. But she gets there and she meets these characters that she knows through reading these books. But she also meets a stranger, a new character that she hasn't read about before. And so she's trying to kind of piece it all together, figure out who this new guy is, but we'll never actually know because the author died before she could finish writing the series. So I think there's one book left in the series that she hadn't written, but she was in a really bad car accident and so hasn't been able to finish. Obviously, she's dead. So Elsie meets Anders, this grumpy old man. He's not an old man, this grumpy young man. And he's like, how did you get here? What are you doing? She tells him about the books, kind of, and he knows about the books. So it's very meta. It's weird. The story grew on me the more I listened to it. I didn't love it when I started it because it was so much more fantastical than The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip, which had elements of magical realism in them, but wasn't like it was still set in real life, where this one again is in a fictional town. You're meeting these characters who are book characters, and Elsie knows everything about them because this is her favorite book series. So it took me a little while to like really get claws into the story, but by the end of it I quite enjoyed it. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more fantastical but still, set in modern times, then this would be a good one. And the last 2 books of the month. These were for my upcoming in-person book club in June. I'm so excited to discuss these books with my book club. The first book was one of my top books of 2024, and the sequel and final book in the duology came out a couple weeks ago. And these are A Fate Inked in Blood and A Curse Carved in Bone by Danielle L. Jensen, also a Canadian author. We love that. And she lives in the same city that I do. So every time I leave my house, I hope that I bump into her and get to meet her and become friends, which is never going to happen because who am I when she is who she is? Anyway, A Fate Inked in Blood and A Curse Carved in Bone is a Norse fantasy duology. I've never really been, big on Norse mythology until I really read these books, and even then I don't know a whole lot. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, so many moments of like the main character feeling unworthy because someone else has essentially taken control of her life, and so she feels unworthy of the power that she has, while also learning to become more confident in who she is as a person and the powers that she's able to wield, and learning about love and just becoming her own person essentially. And there's just something so wonderful about this series being a duology. I don't know why more authors don't write duologies, because you get a fully fleshed out story, but it's only 2 books. And so it doesn't take such a long time to get through this story, but you're still able to put in a good amount of detail into these characters and this world. And these were a highlight for me, and I'm already looking forward to rereading the second book. I have a week until book club, and so I might reread it again. So good. It was so good. It was so good. Anyway, those were all the books that I read in May 2025. If you are interested in keeping up with what I'm reading, I have an account on the Storygraph app. I'll leave all the links for that below as well. Please give me a follow or add me as a friend. Would love to see what you're reading. Yeah, and if you are interested in sticking around, I want to try and make more of these videos, trying to come up with ideas of what I can post. Definitely will be continuing these reading wrap-ups, I think. Yeah, let me know what books you've read in May, which books you would recommend. I'm always looking for new recommendations. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you come back for more. Let's see how we did, shall we?